The Silentiom. The rain wasn't just falling, it was etching the city, a slow, acid drizzle that blurred the neon signs into weeping watercolors and turned the asphalt into a black mirror reflecting a fractured world. Leo Vance watched it from the window of his third-floor walk-up, his breath fogging the cold glass. He traced a finger through the condensation, not making a shape, just feeling the drag of moisture against skin. It was on nights like this that the feeling came, a low, humming dissonance at the edge of his perception, a certainty that the world he saw was merely the title page of a much deeper, darker, and more magnificent text. He was a translator by trade, a man who made his living navigating the subtle, treacherous spaces between languages. But his true work, his obsession, was the translation of a different kind, the decoding of reality's hidden syntax. It was a lonely pursuit, born from a childhood of inexplicable intuitions and a series of coincidences too precise to be called chance. Synchronicities, he'd learned to call them, though the word felt too clean, too academic, for the visceral tug he felt when they occurred. The room behind him was a map of his mind. Books on Jung, on quantum physics, on ancient mysticism, were stacked in teetering ziggurats. Scraps of paper covered in his tight, anxious script were pinned to a corkboard, connected by a web of red string, a futile attempt to chart the pattern he felt was there, just beyond the veil of the ordinary. The central pin held a single, worn business card, blank except for a phone number embossed in a faint, elegant font. He'd found it a week ago, slipped inside a book on archetypes he'd bought from a street vendor he'd never seen before or since. A synchronicity. With a sigh that seemed to come from the soles of his worn-out shoes, Leo turned from the window. The silence of the apartment was a physical presence, broken only by the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a loose gutter outside. But then, another sound layered itself underneath. A faint, melodic hum. It wasn't coming from the street or the adjacent apartment. It seemed to emanate from the very walls, a vibration felt more than heard, a thread of sound that plucked at something deep in his marrow. He stood frozen, listening. It was a tune he almost recognized, a lullaby from a dream he couldn't quite remember. As quickly as it came, it faded, leaving behind only the rain and a profound, unsettling silence. This was it. The call. He'd felt it before, this subtle pull, this whisper from the periphery. Ignoring it had always led to a feeling of stagnation, a sense of being trapped in a waiting room while life happened elsewhere. Tonight, he would answer. He pulled on his heavy wool coat, the scent of old tobacco and damp wool a familiar comfort. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move. The city at night was a different entity. The daylight crowds retreated, and a more ancient, shadowed population emerged. The rain had thinned the usual throng, leaving the sidewalks to the dedicated, the desperate, and the nocturnal. Leo walked without a clear destination, his senses heightened. He felt the slick cobblestones under his feet, saw the way the streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. He was listening, not with his ears, but with his entire being, for the next signpost. He found himself drawn to the older part of the city, where the buildings leaned close together as if sharing secrets. The storefronts here were stranger, a shop that sold only antique keys, another displaying ornate, empty bird cages. And then he saw it. A narrow, unmarked door, painted a deep, glossy black, nestled between a boarded-up tavern and a laundromat. Above it, a small, dimly lit sign in the shape of an Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail, glowed with a faint, amber light. He had passed this way 100 times and was certain the door had never been there. The humming was back, a little stronger now, seeming to pulse from behind the black wood. He pushed the door open. A bell, not a cheap jingle but a deep, resonant chime, announced his entrance. The air inside was thick with the smell of old paper, beeswax, and something else, something metallic and electric, like the air after a lightning strike. The room was a labyrinth of shelves crammed with curiosities, dusty glass jars containing unidentifiable biological specimens, stacks of yellowed maps charting non-existent continents, and statues of deities from forgotten pantheons. It was a museum of the anomalous. "You are earlier than I anticipated, but not unwelcome." The voice was dry and raspy, like pages turning. An old man emerged from the shadows behind a cluttered counter. He was gaunt, his face a web of fine lines, but his eyes were a startling, luminous blue, holding a light that seemed entirely separate from the dim bulbs overhead. He wore a velvet waistcoat that had once been rich purple but was now faded to the color of a bruise. "I'm not sure what I'm doing here," Leo said, his own voice sounding small and young in the dense quiet of the shop. "Few ever are," the old man replied, a faint smile playing on his thin lips. "That is the prerequisite. Certainty is a cage. My name is Alistair. And you, I suspect, are a seeker. You feel the cracks in the world, the places where the light gets in, or out." Leo felt a jolt. The man's words were not just accurate, they were articulating a feeling Leo had carried since childhood but had never been able to name. "The cracks," Leo repeated, the words tasting strange and powerful on his tongue. Alistair gestured around him. "This is a repository for objects that have fallen through those cracks. Things that have known synchronicity, that have been touched by intention, or soaked in fear. They carry resonance." He picked up a small, smooth stone from the counter. This, for instance, was used by a monk for 60 years in meditation. "Hold it." Hesitantly, Leo reached out and took the stone. It was warm, and as his fingers closed around it, a wave of profound, unshakable peace washed over him. It was a feeling so foreign, so diametrically opposed to his usual state of anxious searching, that his eyes welled up. He quickly handed it back, the sensation fading like a dream upon waking. "You see," Alistair said softly, "the mind is not contained within the skull. It extends. It imprints. It connects. You have been trying to read the world with your conscious mind, Leo. A valiant effort, but like trying to taste a symphony with a single taste bud. How do you know my name?" "The same way you knew to come here," Alistair said cryptically. "But you are not here for a lecture. You are here for the next step. There is a disturbance. A rip in the local psyche. A place where fear has congealed, become almost solid. It is creating echoes, drawing people into their own darkest reflections. It is called the Silentiom, the place of the unsaid. An old tenement building on the edge of the river, slated for demolition. People go in, but what comes out is less. Leo's heart was pounding. This was it, the mysterious event, the call to adventure he had both dreaded and desired. What am I supposed to do? You are a translator, Alistair said, his piercing eyes locking with Leo's. So translate. Listen to what the silence there is screaming. But be warned. Your greatest weapon and your greatest vulnerability are one and the same, your own subconscious. The Silentiom will hold up a mirror. Do not be too horrified by what you see staring back. From beneath the counter, Alistair produced a small, old-fashioned brass key. The front door is barred. This will take you through the basement. The choice, as always, is yours. Leo took the key. It was cold and heavy, and it felt like a point of no return. He nodded, a wordless commitment, and turned to leave. One more thing, Alistair called out. Do not try to fight the shadows. A shadow is cast by a light. Your task is not to battle the darkness, but to find the source of the light that creates it. The rain had turned into a steady, cold downpour by the time Leo reached the river. The Silentiom stood apart from the other warehouses, a hulking silhouette of decaying brick and boarded-up windows. It looked less like a building and more like a skull, its empty windows staring out at the black, churning water. The air around it was different, the sound of the rain seemed muted, absorbed by a profound, hungry silence. He could feel it pulling at him, a psychic undertow. He found the basement entrance, a rusted iron door half submerged in a puddle. The brass key turned smoothly, with a click that sounded unnaturally loud. The door swung inward on groaning hinges, revealing a darkness so absolute it felt like stepping into a void. The smell hit him first, damp rot, mildew, and beneath it, the coppery tang of old fear. He stepped inside, flicking on his powerful flashlight. The beam cut through the black, illuminating a low-ceilinged basement filled with the detritus of decades, broken furniture, piles of mildewed newspapers, and the skeletal remains of old boilers. The silence was the true presence here. It was not an absence of sound, but an active, pressing force. It felt heavy, like water at depth, and it seemed to swallow the beam of his light, making it appear weak and insignificant. He moved forward, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the vast space. Then the whispers started. Not from any discernible direction, but from inside his own head. At first, they were indistinct, a susurrus of meaningless noise. But as he ascended a crumbling concrete staircase to the ground floor, they began to coalesce. Not good enough, a voice, chillingly familiar, hissed. It was his father's voice, from a long-ago argument that had carved a permanent scar on his psyche. They all leave in the end, this one was his first love, the words she'd spoken when she walked away. Wasting your life, chasing ghosts, a fool's errand, Leo clenched his jaw, gripping the flashlight until his knuckles were white. They're just thoughts, he muttered to himself, but the words were devoured by the silence. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, weaving together the tapestry of his deepest insecurities and regrets. He saw movement in the periphery of his vision, shadowy figures darting behind pillars, but when he swung the light, there was nothing there. Just deeper shadows. He found himself in a long, narrow hallway. The doors to the apartments were all ajar, and as he passed each one, a scene from his own life played out in the darkness within, illuminated by a sickly, internal light. In one, he saw his younger self, humiliated at school, the laughter of his classmates echoing distortedly. In another, he saw the moment he decided to abandon his doctoral thesis, the look of disappointment on his professor's face a fresh wound. The Silentiom was not haunted by ghosts of the dead, he realized with dawning horror. It was haunted by the ghosts of his own past, the unresolved traumas and shames that he had buried deep within his subconscious. The whispers became a cacophony, a chorus of his own failures screaming at him from the walls. He felt a crushing weight of despair. Alistair was wrong. This wasn't a test of translation, it was a torture chamber. There was no light here, only an infinite regression of his own darkness. He stumbled into a large, open space that might have once been a common room. In the center of the room, the shadows seemed to coalesce, drawing together into a humanoid form. It was a figure made of pure blackness, a void in the shape of a man. It had no face, but Leo could feel its attention fixed on him. It was the embodiment of the silence, the focal point of all the fear the building had absorbed, including his own. "You see?" a voice spoke, not a whisper now, but clear and cold, and it was undeniably his own voice. The shadow figure took a step towards him. "This is all you are. A collection of mistakes and fears. There is no secret truth. Only this. Only the emptiness, *. Leo wanted to run, but his legs were leaden. The fear was paralyzing, a cold knot in his stomach. The shadow reached out a hand, and as it did, Leo felt a wave of absolute hopelessness wash over him. This was it. This was the truth he had been seeking. The ultimate revelation was that there was no revelation. Only the void. But then, through the storm of his own terror, a single, clear thought emerged. Alistair's voice, calm and sure, "A shadow is cast by a light." He was focusing on the shadow, fighting it, fearing it. But the shadow itself was nothing. It was an absence. His task was not to battle the absence, but to find the source. The light. He closed his eyes, blocking out the terrifying apparition. He stopped trying to fight the whispers and instead let them wash over him. He acknowledged the fear, the shame, the regret. He didn't try to push them away. He simply observed them, as if they were weather patterns in the sky of his mind. And in doing so, he stopped giving them power. He turned his attention inward, away from the external manifestation of his darkness, and toward the core of his own being. He thought of the warm stone in Alistair's shop. The feeling of peace. He thought of the moments in his life that were not defined by fear, but by wonder, the first time he'd read a poem that felt like it was written just for him, the awe of looking at the stars on a clear night, the simple, uncomplicated joy of a shared laugh with a friend. These were not loud, dramatic moments. They were quiet, but they were real. They were his light. He began to hum. It was the same faint, melodic tune he had heard in his apartment, the lullaby from the forgotten dream. It was a weak sound, barely audible over the psychic storm, but it was his. He poured his intention into it, not as a weapon against the dark, but as an affirmation of what he was. A being of consciousness. Of light. He opened his eyes. The shadow figure was still there, but it seemed less substantial. It wavered, as if seen through a heat haze. Leo took a step forward, still humming. He felt a warmth spreading from his chest, a sensation of golden light radiating outward. It wasn't a physical light, his flashlight beam was unchanged, but a light of awareness, of acceptance, of love for the broken, seeking thing that he was. The shadow recoiled. It couldn't abide the light, not because the light was attacking it, but because the light revealed its true nature, an illusion, a phantom fed by fear. With a sound like a sigh of static, the figure dissolved, scattering into harmless, ordinary shadows. The oppressive silence shattered. Leo could hear the rain outside again, a normal, comforting sound. The whispers were gone. The hallway was just a hallway, empty and derelict. The psychic weight had lifted. He stood in the center of the room, breathing deeply, feeling more alive and more truly himself than he ever had. He had faced the mirror of his subconscious and, by accepting what he saw, had integrated it. The shadow was a part of him, yes, but it was not all of him. He walked out of the Silentiom as the first gray light of dawn tinged the sky. The city was stirring, but it looked different to him. The cracks were still there, but now he saw them not as flaws, but as possibilities. They were the places where the inner world met the outer, where intention could shape reality, where the light of consciousness could shine through. Days later, he returned to the curious shop, but the black door was gone. In its place was a solid, unbroken brick wall. He wasn't surprised. Alistair had been a teacher, a manifestation of the very guidance he sought, appearing when he was ready and vanishing when the lesson was learned. In his pocket, his fingers closed around the brass key. It was warm now, humming with a soft, steady frequency. He knew this was not the end. It was merely the end of the beginning. The universe was vast, layered, and infinitely mysterious, and he was now, truly, a part of its conversation. He looked up at the rain-washed sky, a sense of profound wonder and inspiration filling him. The search would continue, but he was no longer searching for something outside himself. He was exploring the infinite landscape within, learning to translate not just the words of men, but the silent, luminous language of existence itself. And he knew, with a certainty that went beyond thought, that the most thrilling mysteries were not in the distant stars, but in the next conscious breath, the next choice, the next moment of choosing light over shadow. The drama was just beginning. The echoes of Leo's journey fade into the city's rain-soaked hum. But the questions he faced linger in the silence, the spaces between your own thoughts. What hidden architecture lies beneath the world you take for granted? What shadows would you find if you listened to the silence in an old, forgotten place? This was but one case from the unseen world. One thread pulled from the vast tapestry of the unknown. If this path into the twilight of the mind captivated you, if you felt the pull of the hidden pattern, you are not alone. The investigation continues. Subscribe to the channel, and join our growing circle of seekers. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode, where we will delve into another enigmatic chronicle from the edges of reality. A new mystery is already taking shape in the shadows, waiting for a listener like you. Leave a like if the story resonated with you, if it made you look twice at a coincidence, or question the nature of your own fears and strengths. That signal helps us navigate toward the stories that matter most. And most importantly, comment below. What did the Silentiom reflect back at you? What are the unsolved mysteries of your own perception? Your thoughts, your own strange experiences, they are the true lifeblood of this exploration. We are here to decipher this hidden world, together. The world is not what it seems. Stay curious.